Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we're continuing our division roundup with the NFC North. We've gotten through 6 of these already, 2 more to go. Hope you guys are enjoying fantasy football season. Plenty of preseason games on the way. Almost people, about 4 or 5 more weeks. Real life, professional, meaningful football, and we want to get you prepped up. As always, before we get to that point, I am joined by none other than PFF's own Andrew Erickson. Find him on Twitter at @AndrewErickson_. He's been with me for all these team previews so far. And Andrew, I think we've done a good job keeping them evergreen. You know, if you guys didn't catch the ones, from July, they still work. Go listen to them. What else you got to do? But Andrew, it's August 10th, man. How's it going?
Dude. It's going great, man. I love the new backdrop. Excellent in the PFF office. Love seeing it. Studio
living. Getting that audio right for the faithful listeners of the PFF Fantasy Football Pod out there. Per usual with our division preview, we're going to go through every team, ask a defining question, who's the most underutilized player, favorite fantasy value, wild card scenario, and finally give our picks for the over-under. So Andrew, starting off with the Chicago Bears, when is Justin Fields getting this starting job? That's all anyone cares about.
Yeah, that's really the big scenario, and you think it'd be after week 1 because you have the Bears playing the Rams, and I can't imagine it's going to go well for Andy Dalton and company. I think the biggest thing that Andy Dalton can't deliver on is working behind this patchwork offensive line. Like, Bears have PFF's 28th ranked offensive line heading into next year, and we saw Andy Dalton play behind a bad offensive line last year, and it did not work out favorably for him. So, again, Justin Fields offers that mobility that he can escape from the pocket, make throws off script, which is something Andy Dalton can't do, and based on the way that this offensive line is constructed, that may necessarily be what they need at the quarterback position to save Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace, their jobs, man. They can't sit down without getting a lot of heat on the rear ends because they need to deliver wins in 2021, and I do believe that Justin Fields is going to give them the best chance. So I don't think it's going to necessarily take super long. I mean, if Dalton's playing well, then okay, keep him in there, but I can't imagine we're going to start second half of the season, Justin Fields not going to be under center.
Looking at the schedule, the Rams game, everyone's saying, okay, why would you sacrifice Fields to the Rams anyway? I don't actually see them, though, going with Andy Dalton in week 1. He doesn't play good because he's facing the reigning #1 defense in the league, and they're really going to pull him out right before he gets a chance to go against the Bengals again? I don't know, Andrew. So that just seems like such a short leash, and if you look at the schedule after that, we got Rams, Bengals, Browns, Lions, Raiders. Dalton could live with that stretch. After that, it gets tough again. Packers, Bucks, 49ers, Steelers. But their bye isn't until week 10. There is a possibility, I don't think it happens, but there's a possibility Fields is not out there till week 11. The city of Chicago might burn down by that point. I mean, we're seeing like 1 touchdown training camp highlights, and people are already losing their mind for Fields. Gun to your head, when would you say he gets out there? I would say before week 6. I'm thinking sometime at the end of September. What's your feel?
I agree with the way that you kind of spinned it with that bye week, because you imagine, okay, now we're inserting this mobile quarterback in. We can add new packages to the offense that we haven't necessarily worked on before. We can get everyone acclimated to life with Justin Fields under center full time. And again, I think that makes probably the most sense. So I think the second half probably is that area that I would target. So after week 10.
And people, which I'll probably repeat this like 3 times in this podcast. You've heard me say it already. If you get Justin Fields in your draft, that's great. We want dual threat quarterbacks in Fields. I mean, as much as he can also throw the ball, him and Lance just have that rushing upside that we don't normally see from year 1 signal callers. If you get him, though, and you're worried about who's going to be your quarterback for the first half of the year, it's Mr. Kirk Cousins, starting with the Bengals, the Cardinals, the Seahawks, the Browns, the Lions, the Panthers, and the Cowboys first 7 games of the year. So might take a little bit, but I think they're moving in the right direction. Andrew, I was really not pissed, but I was going along with the rest of the fantasy football Twitter outrage on some of Nagy's quotes earlier in this offseason. I've kind of come around, though. I get it. You don't give him the job immediately without any competition and watch him, struggle. You let him win the job and start to get the momentum going with that. So we'll see. I mean, while we did hear the quote, on our boss's own Chris Collinsworth podcast where, Nagy said, no, Andy's our starter definitively. He went on, if you listen to the whole podcast, was more, just mature is not the right word, more rational about the situation, as I think a lot of us would like to see. So fingers crossed, we're not really going to see this Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes light thing in Chicago. I'm confident, pretty confident Fields is going to be out there sooner rather than later. Let's talk most underutilized player next, Andrew. Who do you got on the Bears?
For me, it's Bears second-year tight end Cole Kmet.
Nailed it.
Because Jimmy Graham, corpse of Jimmy Graham, still lurking in the red zone, in the end zone for the Bears. And that's really what's kind of stopping us from getting all aboard a Cole Kmet second-year breakout, because Kmet got the snaps. Like, his role increased during the second half of the year last season. He never played less than 77% of the team's offensive snaps, played ahead of veteran Jimmy Graham after the bye week. So it's all there for him. Like, it's up for the taking. 11th most routes run at the position, Cole Kmet. But Jimmy Graham, he has a no-trade clause. You've said it a million times, Ian. He's on the team, and he's going to catch touchdowns because that's what Jimmy Graham does. And we're probably going to be talking about him as like a top 10 tight end at some point during the season because he's stumbled into 6 or 7 receiving touchdowns. So as long as Graham is on the roster, and unless we like really see the snaps where it's like he's not playing at all, which I don't necessarily envision, you can't get too overboard with Kmet, at least early on.
Graham could be cut at any point, but could not be traded, as you bring up there. God forbid someone wanted to trade for Jimmy Graham. Not happening under Ryan Pace's watch. I would say, and this kind of sent like a shiver down my spine when I realized this. I was going through, looking at what tight ends just basically have wide receiver usage, and Jimmy Graham fits that mold. 67% of his targets last year came from the slot or out wide. They got rid of Anthony Miller. I mean, Daz Newsome's a 6th rounder, like Riley Ridley, Javon Wims. We might see a 2 tight end base offense in Chicago with Jimmy Graham basically being their slot receiver. And he's not completely washed. We still see him make a handful of like pretty great contested catches in the red zone every year. You know, last play of Mitch Trubisky's career, he hits, MVP, hits Jimmy Graham down the seam, and Jimmy just leaves the stadium. I want that to be his last play of the Chicago Bears tenure so bad. I'm not sure that's going to be the case though. So Jimmy Graham, even though he's holding back Cole Kmet, it's just one of these situations where we want the younger guy to get the job, and Cole Kmet, I think he could do good things with it. That's why he's our most underutilized player. Unfortunately, not looking too likely. I'm still taking guys like Adam Troutman, Anthony Ferkser, and Gerald Everett in the tight end range well before Cole Kmet. Andrew, favorite fantasy value? Are we about to talk some Darnell Mooney?
No, it is not Darnell Mooney. I'm just going straight to the alpha. I'm going straight to Allen Robinson because I don't think that the market is recognizing that he's going to play with the best quarterback of his life this year, regardless of whether it's Andy Dalton or whether it's Justin Fields under center. Because look, say what you want about Andy Dalton, but last year down the stretch, like when he finally got him settled in, like he wasn't really even that bad. Like weeks 11 through 17, he was PFF's 14th highest graded quarterback, throwing from the intermediate level, 10 to 19 yards, posted a 90.7 PFF passing grade. It was higher than Dak Prescott, actually ranked 8th best among all quarterbacks over that time span. Last season, Robinson was 4th in targets and PFF's 4th highest graded receiver on targets thrown in that intermediate level, 10 to 19 yards downfield. So I think that we're going to see this offense throw the ball a ton with Andy Dalton under center. That's what we saw with Matt Nagy when Nick Foles was the quarterback and when Matt Nagy was actually calling plays last year before he gave up play calling duties, and then they really turned the script to like giving the ball to David Montgomery a lot more in the running game. So I think the volume is going to continue to be there for Allen Robinson. Last 2 seasons, he's the only receiver with 150 plus targets. So I think that's locked and loaded once again to be there. And he's just not sexy. Like he's not the sexy guy. And like he's not CeeDee Lamb. Like he's not. But at the same time, you're locking in a consistent player that's going to produce no matter what, and now has untapped potential that Andy Dalton could be the best quarterback he's played with. And Justin Fields will definitely be the best quarterback that he's ever played with as PFF's most accurate quarterback in the PFF college football era.
Last year, I wasn't sitting in this chair, but I was on this podcast and I was saying Nick Foles is the best quarterback that Allen Robinson will have ever played with. Maybe he was, man. It worked out well enough. Robinson continued to return, the wide receiver 1 value that we've come to expect from him really throughout most of his career. He had the one dud with Bortles, but come on. I mean, the fact he even got one boom out of Bortles tells you all you need to know. And just for those that don't remember all the hardship Allen Robinson has had to go through, even dating back to his days at Penn State, Christian Hackenberg, Matt McGloin, Blake Bortles, Chad Henne, Mitchell Trubisky, Chase Daniel, and Nick Foles, Andy Dalton, Justin Fields. It's not a hot take at all. They are both absolutely the best quarterbacks he's going to have played with. Andrew, do we have to start calling Andy Dalton Andrew Dalton? Because I'm not sure if you saw the pic, man, but stunting a pretty fresh visor at practice. He's got a mustache going. Maybe this is a new Andy Dalton.
Did he borrowed Nick Foles' visor? Like Nick Foles is like going in the locker room trying to figure out, dude, where's my visor? Like, oh, Andrew Dalton took it, and he's flashing the red beard. I love it, man. Yo, the red rifle's got got bullets in the chamber ready to unleash.
Real quickly on Darnell Mooney, I think he's fine where he's going. Like, I think wide receiver 48 was his ADP on Underdog right now. I just would chill out some people. And, our PFF social media is guilty of this sometimes. I saw one quote. I don't want to throw Jared under the bus, but I think it was like Darnell Mooney is going to the moon. Let's try to, when we say someone's going to the moon, let's not say that for someone that we're ranking like 40th or something. Let's kind of reserve that for CeeDee Lamb. That is fine. CeeDee Lamb going to the moon, top 10 receiver. I get that. I'm not sure if the moon is in Mooney's potential range of outcomes this year. He's fine as your wide receiver 5 or 6 on your team. I'm not discounting that. Just realize, people, I put together the damn clip that's circulating on the internet of him roasting Ramsey, roasting Carlton Davis, and getting overthrown. Those are his highlights, basically, man. Like, that's not great when your top 2 highlights are missed passes. I know he should have, the ball should have been on him, but we're still looking at a guy that last year, 128 qualified receivers, ranked 85th in PFF receiving grade, 103rd in yards per route run, 52nd percentage of catchable passes caught. He's good. I'm not sure he's this world beater we need to be prioritizing in drafts. Right now, he is going one spot behind Jalen Waddle. And Andrew, I will lose my shit if we ever see Mooney have a higher ADP than Jalen Waddle. But again, story for another day with Jalen Waddle. Tune in to My Guys article out on PFF.com on Wednesday or Thursday, and you might just hear more about Mr. Waddle. Andrew, what is your wild card scenario for the 2021 Chicago Bears?
A wild card scenario is that Damien Williams returns to form as a legitimate fantasy option at the running back position. I think that he's kind of emerging as one of these late round running backs that you can target with potential standalone value, in addition to some upside if anything were to happen to a starter in David Montgomery. So we talk about Damien Williams, he's really filling in that receiving back role that is usually occupied by Tariq Cohen, but Tariq Cohen is still returning back from his injury. He's still weeks away, according to Matt Nagy. So that's concerning about where Cohen's status is, but it seems like they really love Williams. He's impressing at Bears camp as a receiver. And look, man, when Damien Williams was on the Chiefs, like, he was made famous for that wheel route. Like, he was friggin' nasty at it. Mahomes was always hitting him down the seam on the wheel route. So again, he's been a guy who's been involved as a pass catcher. Last season he played in 2019, he caught at least 3 passes in over half of his games for the Kansas City Chiefs. And look, you mentioned it before. You could see Jimmy Graham in the slot. Maybe they play Damien Williams in the slot. Like, they need more bodies to catch passes here with Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson operating as the 1-2 guys. There's really no one else to throw to since they traded Anthony Miller, who had a 77% snap share last season. So Cohen played over 27% of his snaps from the slot in 2019. If he's still banged up, I really like Damien Williams as a guy to stash with one of your late round picks to kind of see his role emerge in this offense. He obviously has familiarity with Matt Nagy from their days back to Kansas City. So I like Damien Williams a lot.
So I had the potential wild card being Montgomery continues to have full control of the backfield. So we're on the same page with like this backfield. We don't really know what the splits are going to be like because Tariq Cohen right now is out of training camp. And, Matt Nagy suggested here recently, this past Tuesday on August 3rd, so about a week ago, he said that Cohen is weeks away from being activated, hobbling out there on the sideline. And for those that just think that, hey, who cares if Tariq Cohen's back? He's not any good. He's the 11th highest paid running back in the NFL. I don't know why Tariq Cohen is the 11th highest paid running back in the NFL. He is, and they love feeding him targets when he's out there. So if Tariq is back, that's going to hurt everyone involved, obviously, mostly David Montgomery. The first 3 games of last year when Tariq was healthy, Montgomery had snap rates of 45%, 54%, and 56%. I don't know that people realize just how important the receiving production was to David Montgomery last year. He was literally 5th among all running backs in just PPR points from only receiving production. Like, that's like Alvin Kamara was first, Nyheim Hines, Chase Edmonds, like Eckler. We expect those guys, but then there is David Montgomery. And you bring up a good point, Andrew, because Damien Williams could just be their backup to Tariq Cohen, and we see Montgomery go back to 50, 60% snap rates more weeks than not. In my Twitter bio, I've had president of the Cordero Patterson fan club in there for years. I take that responsibility very seriously. But it was funny when, Tariq originally got hurt last year. Everyone was saying, oh, Ian, waiver wire, CPAT time. Like, let's get it. And I'll say, no, let's not get it. They're going to treat him as a gadget. He is not a real, I got to choose my words carefully here. He's not a real 3-down running back, even though he is talented enough and versatile enough to moonlight just about anywhere. And the Bears treated him that way. Cordero never had a game with more than 20 snaps lined up in the backfield last year. So if Damien ends up being a guy who, hey, his last freaking game, he had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. I think we all know he can be a solid NFL running back. He might actually make this far more of a committee than people are hoping. Where do you have Montgomery ranked, Andrew? Because I've been moving him up a little bit as the Tariq Cohen news kind of gets worse and worse, but I have him as RB17, still behind guys like Swift, Carson, Clyde. I just can't get him into that top 14, 15 range where I'm, trying to actively come away with him in drafts.
Yeah, that's kind of a similar area to where I have him. I have him at RB20, and I did move him up a little bit. So for me, the only other guys I'm ranking ahead of him, especially considering the people, I have Travis Etienne ranked ahead of him because I'm chasing some rookie upside with the potential of him being a locked and loaded pass catcher. I have Dobbins because I just think Dobbins is better overall, and if they both don't catch passes, then I think that Dobbins will be the better scorer. And then Darrell Henderson, who is kind of just like a polarizing player to talk about rankings wise because it could change drastically if they add another player, but I like the outlook of the Rams offense more. But yeah, I can't get behind him going ahead of Swift or Carson or Edwards-Helaire or any of those guys.
Yeah, just firmly in that kind of next tier of backs. In my last podcast, I had on here about my top 10 tips for your fantasy drafts. One of those was, I'm using first, second, and third round picks on the top 14 running backs. After that, when it comes down to guys like Montgomery, Henderson, Etienne, if they fall to rounds 5 or 6, then absolutely. We don't hate players. We hate ADPs. But when it comes down to like Montgomery versus a legit top 10, top 12 wide receiver, I'm taking the wide out every single time. Andrew, courtesy of the fine folks at DraftKings Sportsbook, we have an over-under for the Bears. Just 7.5, minus 125 juice on the under. What are you feeling?
Going with the under on the 7.5. I think that the Packers and Vikings are really strong opponents in their division. And I don't like the fact that they're going to start Andy Dalton for a lot of the season. They also have to play the NFC West, which is not ideal because we talked about that on that podcast. That division is literally stacked. We're all like, okay, over. It's like, we can't take the over on everybody. So that means we need to take the unders on the team that they play. So I'm going to go with the under on the Bears, 7.5.
I'm going to take the slight over here. And maybe, after we get through these 4 teams, I'll be coming back to this because you're right. We can't be taking every single over. But as underwhelming as the Matt Nagy era has been, 12-4, 8-8, 8-8, and it wasn't fluky last year. Sometimes you see the 8-8, but their point differential is that of like a 6-10 team or something like that. But last year, their expected wins and losses were still 8.1, 7.9. So I'll take the over with the extra juice going on the under anyway. Would I expect the Bears to hit double-digit wins? Absolutely not. But you could imagine, Andrew. Moving on, we got the Detroit Lions. Everyone's been waiting for the Detroit Lions breakdown. We'll skid through this one, Andrew. Defining question, I got, can Jared Goff maybe not be terrible? Because as rough as things got in 2020, I do think people need to remember this is a guy that at least production-wise, he's put up numbers in the past. 4,600 plus passing yards in 2018 and 2019. The huge issue for Goff that I'm sure if you watch the guy play, you can realize once the play breaks down, once he has to go off script, it's pretty much dead. Last year, the only quarterback with a larger drop-off in yards per attempt under pressure versus kept clean, my guy Drew Lock. And as much as I try to stand Drew Lock on here, he's usually not good company to be keeping at the top of leaderboards other than big-time throw rate. PFF does give this Lions offensive line a number 10 spot ranking ahead of 2021. I'm not saying you should buy Jared Goff. I don't think I've drafted him in one best ball draft throughout the entire offseason. But Andrew, could he maybe just be like an average quarterback? Are we overlooking that potential? Because if he could, we'll get to the win total. Maybe, just maybe. Dan Campbell, hard-nosed, people playing for the guy. Jared Goff doesn't completely suck. Am I just talking myself in too much of a circle here?
Can't get behind taking any types of overs for the teams that are flirting with potentially tanking for their franchise, because I've learned that lesson after taking the over on the Miami Dolphins a couple years back. Did not work favorably in my favor, so not going to make the same mistake twice. But when it comes to Jared Goff, man, we're talking about and the NFL's 8th ranked quarterback all time in passing yards per game. Jared Goff, 263.3 passing yards per game. So yeah, I think that he can be good enough to at least supplement and support the guys that we care about for fantasy football. And for me, my defining question was, how high can TJ Hockenson finish this year as a tight end? I have him firmly locked in as my tight end 4. I think it's pretty clear that there's a big 3 and then a teardrop to TJ Hockenson, but I wouldn't be surprised if he closes the gap because of the just stupid volume he's going to see in this offense. Look, Jared Goff has a history of targeting the tight end position. Over the past 2 seasons, he's targeted the tight end at a 20% clip, 10th highest. He also ranks 5th in total passing yards and 5th in total attempts to the tight end position. We saw Tyler Higbee breakout, a face-melting breakout for 5 weeks. And that could be potentially what is in the outcomes for a TJ Hawkinson. We've already talked about the other players on this offense. There's nobody. They have the most vacated targets and air yards from any other team in this offseason because they got rid of Galladay, they got rid of Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola. All these guys are gone. And of the 26 tight ends to lead their teams in target share since 2015, 58% have finished as top 3 fantasy producers. And of the tight ends that have finished with at least 115 targets, 75% of them have finished as top 3 fantasy tight ends. The PFF projections have him for 115 targets, which is only 19 more than he had last year when he was competing with those other guys for targets. I think we can probably project him for 20 more targets. That's like 1 per game, just a little bit. I think we can hit that. So I think that Hawkinson has a legitimate chance of entering into that top tier and being a legitimate difference maker when you can get him in round 5 or round 6.
We also finally don't have to deal with Sheriff Jesse James anymore. It's ridiculous that he was a problem, but the Lions gave him like a $24 million contract before they drafted Hawkinson. And because of that last year, Hawkinson only hit that 75% snap rate in 7 of his 16 games. He was still the undisputed starter, but yeah, just being on the field for an extra 15 snaps a game could also go along with getting that, not huge, just a modest target increase. And, don't confuse Tyler Higbee's not hitting his ADP last year or coming even close to it. That wasn't on Goff necessarily. That was on Gerald Everett making that a 2 tight end offense. Won't be the case here in Detroit. Andrew, let's talk most underutilized player. We're talking DeAndre Swift, right?
Yeah, I think that's ultimately the question here is DeAndre Swift's workhorse role. Is it a workhorse role? I mean, we've seen some reports where, Albert Breer just straight up said he looks like the bell cow for the Detroit Lions. And that goes against basically everything that the coaches have said. Anthony Lynch talks about using a committee. And I think that's really more or less what we're going to see. We're going to get more into Jamal Williams because I do think that he's probably one of the better values on this team. But the thing with Swift is you need to realize that his path to success is through this team trailing in games. Like, it's all about his receptions and usages in the passing game. Like, you really can't bank on his rushing production to really get you anywhere. Like, yes, he's obviously probably going to be pretty efficient running behind one of the a top 10 offensive line. We can lock that in, but is he going to score 3 touchdowns, like 4 rushing touchdowns? Like, maybe it's either going to be him busting off a big run because Jamal Williams has a chance to operate at the goal line instead of DeAndre Swift. So I think that where he's going, I think that it's pretty fair based. I would not consider him in a standard format. Half point PPR, he's not nearly as valuable. In a full point PPR, yes, I think Swift is a legitimate RB2 that you can definitely lock and load every single week, especially when you can look at the lines and be like, yeah, they're going to be trailing in this game. I can feel more confident about DeAndre Swift. This coaching staff is basically coming from other systems that use 2 running back systems. So Dan Campbell's coming from the Saints, obviously Kamara and Latavius Murray, and then Anthony Lynn's coming from the Chargers, where it was Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. So, I mean, we've seen guys like Austin Eckler and Alvin Kamara obviously succeed with just unlimited snaps, like playing just like a 60% snap share. So there is a path where Swift can deliver, but don't draft Swift thinking, okay, I got a top 5 running back, like top 10 running back. I don't think that's just in his ceiling, just based on the fact that this offense overall is not going to be impressive.
Yeah, the path to success is 100% revolving around the pass game usage, and he is one of only 10 running backs PFF projects to get at least 60 targets next year. It's not the end of the world if Jamal Williams is going to be really involved in this offense. And the quote that, rocked the fantasy football Twitter world back in the middle of May from new offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn, Jamal is what I call a classic A-back. My A-backs are normally my bigger backs. I can leave those guys in there for all 3 downs. My B-back comes in. He's the guy that sometimes I want to use in space more. He's my speed and space guy. If he's just trying to call Swift his new Austin Eckler, that's fine. Like, that's great. We'll get all these receptions in full point per reception formats, and we'll be vibing. I mean, Adrian Peterson already led this backfield in carries last year, and Swift still returned RB16 value in full point per reception. That's what we need. That's where he is the most special. Last year, only Kamara, James White, Myles Gaskin, Nyheim Hines, and Austin Eckler averaged more yards per route run than DeAndre Swift. So I would just say, Anthony Lynn, he has a nice little history here of the RB1s. Shady turned in an RB4 performance. Melvin Gordon went RB6, RB5, Eckler RB6, and RB12 in PPR points per game. 5 years running of having a top 12 PPR back. Here's to hoping Swift can continue that trend. Andrew, now we're going to talk about the other back because our favorite fantasy value, it's got to be Jamal Williams.
Yes, it's Jamal Williams. And if you haven't checked out some of his mic'd up practices from training camp, go check it out on Twitter because the dude is absolutely hilarious. He's so fun to root for and cheer for. So again, he's also a great value in fantasy football. So you really have no excuse for not leaving your draft with some Jamal Williams exposure because he's going to have a role in this offense. You can't say that about a lot of backup running backs. And at the same time, he also possesses a 3-down skill set like we saw last year when Aaron Jones missed some time. Week 7 and 8, Williams averaged 18.8 fantasy points per game, 21.4 expected fantasy points per game. And he finished last season PFF's 8th highest graded rusher. Like, he has steadily increased his ability and talent as a running back since entering the NFL. And yes, he's been next to this supreme talent in Aaron Jones this entire time. So yes, he has not nearly been, in the spotlight as a feature running back because he really wasn't that good to start his career. He wasn't. But he's gotten a lot better and he's improved and he's earned a spot on this new Lions offense. And I do think that he's going to have a role. He's going to have a couple of weeks when maybe the Lions are playing in more competitive games. There's obviously going to be scenarios where he gets games scripted out and it's going to be the DeAndre Swift show. But look, man, I'm for Jamal Williams and I absolutely love the nicknames that they've given each other, Swifty and Swaggy, for DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. Love it.
Getting Swifty out here as always. People, say it with me. Jamal Williams is a flex with benefits. As always, I got to keep giving credit to Mike Wright, Fantasy Footballers. Came up with that fantastic phrase, but it's completely true for him. A.J. Dillon, James Robinson, Kenyon Drake, Latavius Murray. These guys were, okay, we're getting 10 to 12 combined carries and targets per week. You're not firing them up in your RB1, but you can live with that on a flex in the right matchup, particularly as bye weeks start to come in. And God forbid something happens to Swift, we have a running back that we know can operate on all 3 downs if asked to do so. So, Andrew, like A.J. Dillon, Jamal, Robinson, Drake, and Latavius, those guys I just listed, and there's a few more. I'm taking them ahead of like Tony Pollard and Alexander Mattison, who might have a better best case scenario, but there's also a chance that we just get nothing from them throughout 17 games. I mean, maybe, best ball land if you're just shooting for pure upside and you're saying, you don't have Zeke and you're saying, hey, just Tony Pollard, if he gets to start 12 games, like he's going to absolutely ball the hell out. But I feel like, again, these flexes with benefits, we need to put them a tier above just more the true handcuffs. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree. I know I did a study about 6 weeks ago looking at some of these ambiguous backfields and looking at running back breakouts, and basically what I found was that the handcuffs don't hit. And it's the handcuffs that you don't draft are the ones that actually end up hitting and not the ones that you hold on to all season long. And then when you start them, like an Alexander Mattison or a Brian Hill, and they just don't fire. And you're just like, wow, I just held on to that guy all season long. And then he just busts for me. And now I'm out of my fantasy championship. So yeah, don't hang on to these players unless, again, if Alexander Madison's fallen 50 rounds or 50 spots after ADP, then sure, take a flyer on him. But at the same time, like, you're going to get frustrated holding on to these handcuff running backs that are not doing anything, and you're just holding on to them. So you got to take some of these flex benefits. That's the plan that I plan on using. And
people, just, handcuffing, don't handcuff your own players. And if you already know this, then, excuse me. But if you don't, the theory behind it is this. If you draft Ezekiel Elliott in the first round and you draft Tony Pollard in the 11th, the only way Pollard works out is if Zeke busts. And if your first round pick busts, you're pretty much screwed as it is. So if you have Zeke in the first and it's between Pollard and Madison later, I'm taking Madison because that just gives you a better overall upside for your lineup. It's first or last. We're not trying to, do whatever we can to finish in the middle of the pack. So just keep in mind handcuffing. It's okay more, I think, I've talked about this, I'm more willing to do it at the end of drafts. If we can get, earlier in the offseason, I was messing around with the idea of like Jameis and Taysom as my last 2 picks in best balls because while, using your first and 10th pick, if the first one doesn't work out, like that's a problem. If your 15th round pick doesn't work out and the 16th round one does, okay, then I think we can talk a little bit more about it. But in general, do not handcuff your own guys if the top player is costing you a top 3-4 round pick. Andrew, you could go a million directions in this one. I feel like I usually have a good grasp on, what questions we're on the same page with, and I can already tell we are going to be off on this one. What is your wild card scenario for the 2021 Detroit Lions?
We see a top 24 wide receiver kind of break out of this receiving corps. That's the problem. Right. Like we're trying to figure out who it could potentially be. So I have my guy's Quintez Cephas. He did make that sick one-handed catch that was on the Twitter sphere. So, but I liked him before he became famous before that catch. I just like that. I liked his film when I went back and watched Quintez Cephas. He had the highest passer rating when targeted last year among all the 2020 rookies, 120.4. And the guy saw 9 targets in the first week of his career
10
as a rookie. 10 targets. Excuse me. Sorry, Cephas. Don't mean to do you dirty like that. But that's telling you that he was doing something right. That Matthew Stafford was looking for him early on. And again, the guy was probably shocked, and that's why he didn't produce with those 10 targets, because he's like, oh my God, like they're throwing me the ball. I was not ready for that, but he improved down the stretch, and I liked seeing that from him. The issue is right now the rotation is, it looks like it's Tyrell Williams, Rashad Perryman, and Amon-Ra St. Brown are the 3 starting wide receivers. So again, Cephas is buried. Like, I really don't think you should feel obligated about drafting any of these players. I mean, you want to take a shot on Amon-Ra St. Brown or Tyrell Williams. I think those are probably the 2 guys that are probably start. But at the same time, I mean, if they're not producing, they're going to start to rotate Cephas in a little bit more. I think that he's going to be the guy that I kind of have my eye on during the season. Somebody you want to look for to on the waiver wire, because look, Tyrell Williams, like I get he has a connection with Anthony Lynn back to the Chargers, but I mean, the guy hasn't caught more than 50 passes in a season since 2016. Like, it's been a while since we've seen Tyrell Williams really do anything. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a 4th round rookie pick. Again, he's going to operate in the slot, and people have kind of compared him to Cooper Kupp. Okay, Cooper Kupp was a second or third round pick. So again, I don't want to say Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be locked mode. It's like, okay, like, do you want to lock and load 4 catches for 30 yards in your lineup? Like, you want some guys that can win downfield. I think Cephas can be that guy, and Rashad Perryman's probably the guy I don't want, at least because he's a journeyman, and I just can't get behind a guy that only goes vertical with Jared Goff at quarterback. Like, that's a big issue for me.
Take it easy on my guy, Rashad Perryman. A journeyman only because teams don't like big, athletic, fast receivers. Pick? Is
that your favorite for the Lions receivers, Rashad Perryman?
Yeah, I said wild card scenario. Rashad Perryman just balls the hell out. 3 games with Joe Flacco last year. 4 catches, 62 yards against the Dolphins. 5 catches, 101 yards, 2 tutties versus New England. Even snatched Jonathan Jones' soul during that one. 2 catches, 54 yards in the tutty versus the Chargers as well. Even had 2 more good games against the Dolphins in New England with Darnold. Evan Silva turned me on this, man. Rashad Perryman has always been good. He was just hurt with the Ravens. He came in the Browns. He did some great things with Baker as a rookie. Tampa, we saw that nice stretch at the end of the year where he balled out. And with the Jets, at least for a little bit, man, he did do some good things. So you're right, though. We don't know who it's going to be. And unfortunately, I went to The Athletic. I think The Athletic just has some of the best training camp coverage out there in terms of what you can ask for from beat writers and all that. And the last Detroit Lions scrimmage, it was like a day or 2 ago, Tyrell Williams, Rashad Perryman, and Quinton Cephas were all banged up and not even participating in it. So we'll keep an eye on that. And yeah, people, I mean, if you want to go fire a dart in any of these guys, round 15 or later, I wouldn't blame you. My pick's Rashad, but either way, probably not going to win or lose your fantasy league. Andrew, we got an over-under of 4.5 wins, minus 150 juice on the over. What are you feeling?
And I kind of previewed it a little bit, but they're in tank mode with Jared Goff and how they acquired him, so I'm going to take the under.
Yeah, I'm going to take the under too. I just can't get behind this. Other than the maybe if they were playing the Texans, we could lock in one game, but they're not. And now it's like, okay, they're probably the consensus 31st ranked team in the league, just not really trying to bet on that. And yeah, you said it. When a team is in tank mode, probably just a good idea to stay away.
This team screams like moral victories. Like, Dan Campbell's going to be pumped up if they just lose a game by a field goal. Like, guys, we played really hard, but we don't really want to win anyway. Like, we just want to fight and, to the death. So
if they made
Dan Campbell.
Yeah, I love Dan Campbell. Like, I'm looking forward to more great quotes from him throughout the year. But if they were making it worth our while, giving us plus odds or something, maybe. But minus 150 to bet the over in this economy, miss me with that. Andrew, moving on. Defending divisional champs, Green Bay Packers. My defining question. Will the magic continue here after another offseason with minimal roster turnover? Because Ian Hartitz was one of the idiots that faded Aaron Rodgers last year, and this is why. I wrote this in my fade article. Rodgers is still being drafted as a borderline QB1 at worst, largely due to his longtime reputation as one of the league's top signal callers. Perhaps he'll regain the magic in 2020, although nothing from his recent play or the offensive skill position talent would indicate a massive fantasy comeback is on the horizon. He finished as the QB 10 in fantasy points per game in 2018, the QB 14 in 2019. Last year, world beater, MVP. I think the best version of Rodgers we've ever seen. If you want to say 2011, fine. Top 2 version of Rodgers ever. He still only finished as a QB4, man, because fantasy is sometimes a silly game that rewards rushing quarterbacks more than, not Rodgers isn't a statue, than guys that don't take off as often. So history tells us a 9.1% touchdown rate is going to regress. And again, they just didn't add really anyone of note to this offense. Now we got, apparent BFF/roommate Randall Cobb in the picture. Amari Rodgers is fine, but man, look at every single before the free season. before the free agency cycle, excuse me, like it's always Will Fuller, Curtis Samuel, like look at all these great weapons we can add to Green Bay, and they just routinely do absolutely nothing. Now even strapped with some extra O-line problems than usual. Is the magic going to continue, Andrew, or are we just, once again, like last year, the pissed off Aaron Rodgers on Jordan Love's storyline worked. Are we really going back to the well, basing Aaron Rodgers' success around factors that have nothing to do with our ability to quantify them?
No, we're not going back to this offense being how it was last year. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the touchdown rate. 9.1% was the highest of his entire career. And look, we saw this play out last year with Lamar Jackson. He had a 9% touchdown rate in 2019. It fell to 6.9%, and that's why everyone was mad about Lamar Jackson. It's the exact same scenario, and we've seen this with Rodgers before. He had a 9-point touchdown percent passing rate in 2011, and that fell to 7.1% the following season. And last year, 35.5 touchdown percentage inside the red zone was second in 2020, and it was the highest since 2017 for him. That was really why he was so good, is because all the Aaron Jones touchdowns that we were like, hey, are they going to regress in 2020? We were right. We just forgot to displace them to another player on the offense. It's like, okay, they're going to Aaron Rodgers, and that's what I would expect to kind of correct itself in 2021. I'm going to assume that the running backs are going to score more touchdowns, like an Aaron Jones, like an AJ Dillon, than going to be going through Aaron Rodgers' arm to Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams caught 18 touchdowns in 14 games. That's not going to be something he's going to be able to do again. He's going to score double-digit touchdowns? Yeah, I would say that, but not 18 touchdowns in 14 games play for Devontae Adams. So that's going to necessarily hurt Aaron Rodgers' production, because that's what you need from these pocket passers. Like you said, there's no running juice anymore with Aaron Rodgers. He used to do it at his prime earlier in his career, doesn't do it anymore. He had his least amount rushing attempts this past season. So he's going to have another outlier season of touchdowns. And based on the historical, track record of players performing so above expectation, it's not going to be something that's going to be repeatable. So again, is he fairly priced as the quarterback 8? Yeah, I think that's fair. But at the same time, why just draft Ryan Tannehill? Yeah. Or draft Burrow or just wait on one of these mobile rookies. So that's the way I look at Rodgers. It
was great getting him past the QB 12 spot when all the uncertainty was in the air, but those days are gone. And yeah, I'm with you. While QB 8 is fair, just not really a spot where I've been willing to just go after him really in any fantasy draft so far. Let's talk most underutilized player. I'm going to kick us off with Robert Tonyan, one of the few players I can consistently pronounce their last name right against all odds. But he gets this, I don't know, man. Robert Tonyan just had 11 freaking touchdowns last year. He played great. He literally, one of the craziest stats I found this whole offseason, since targets began being tracked in 1992, everyone that's had 50-plus targets, nobody has ever had more touchdowns than incompletions until Robert Tonyan last year. And he was +6. He had 6 more touchdowns than incomplete passes thrown his way. And what do we say in situations like this? What do we say after A.J. Brown in 2019? Regression. He can't be that good again. He's going to regress. Okay, but when you're that good, you're probably going to get more than 59 targets the following season. I mean, this was already their locked-in starting tight end, 58% snaps in all but one, 58% snaps in all but one game. 11 touchdowns from Rodgers, whatever it was, double digits, insane chemistry, and people are fading the guy because we just say, oh, he can't do it again. Or they say, when has Aaron Rodgers enabled fantasy-friendly tight ends? And if you go back and look, tight ends with 20 catches for the Packers since 2010. Jermichael Finley had that unfortunate career-ending injury. Richard Rodgers, the corpse of Jimmy Graham, Andrew Corliss, Tonyan, Lance Kendricks, Jared Cook, who was only there for 1 year and missed 6 games, Mercedes Lewis, and Martellus Bennett, who bounced after 7 games. They haven't had a legit receiving tight end to be one of the main, target getters in this offense. Robert Tonyan has a non-0% chance to be the number 2 target in this passing game, ahead of MVS, ahead of Cobb, ahead of Jones, only behind Adams. I know it's not the sexiest pick, but Andrew, I feel like the market's still a little bit behind on Tonyan. Rodgers is back. I know you're not using a top 8 pick on the guy at tight end, but there's a hell of a lot worse borderline tight end ones that I think you could be grabbing out there.
I think that he's fine. Again, I'm definitely one of the people that's
fine. Did you just hear the stat? Did you just hear the stat I gave you, man?
Okay, but that's what you're saying. You're saying you're listing out this such outlier stat with him. That's why I'm afraid to dive back in, because it was so unbelievable what he did last year, and some of the stats that I've kind of noticed about him. He also broke 0 tackles. After all of his catches, broke 0 tackles. So
Robert Tonyan, we gotta get a Robert Tonyan Yak account going.
There's so many weird things about his season last year. Again, none of the peripheral metrics like yards after the catch per reception, missed tackles forced per tap. Like, I guess I'm not so sure. Like, okay, yes, he does see more targets, but what does he do with them? Like that, I guess that's my concern with him. Like, I don't know how much he's going to be able to generate on his own. Like, how much of his production last year was really because of Rodgers and because of the
100%. Like 100%.
I guess, yeah. So I guess that's my concern with him. Like, look, he's definitely better than a lot of other tight ends, and you reach a point in the draft where you're just looking for a guy with touchdown upside, and that's Robert Tonyan, like, because he's attached to Aaron Rodgers. So I totally understand buying him there, and the price again is not egregious, but for me, I think I still prefer some of the late round tight ends going after him that I think could see a higher target share in their offense.
Fair. So I'm guessing he's not your most underutilized player.
No, he's not. So mine is just Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
And again, it's tricky to like really label him as underutilized because I think it'd just be really cool to see him like with a 80% snap share and just friggin' be at a Christian McCaffrey level. Like, I think that'd be really cool to see. But at the same time, they do use him correctly, where they take an advantage of how he's used in the passing game. He's caught 52 passes in each of his last 2 seasons. 30 of his receptions came up with him either lined up in the slot or out wide, which kind of shows you that they move him around, and he's really a viable weapon in this passing game. He's not just someone that like catches dump off passes. Like, and that's how you know that you can rely on that pass gaming usage when you project Aaron Jones moving forward in PPR and half point PPR, that like, it's not like game script, like, oh, if they're behind, like then Aaron Jones will catch passes. Like, no, like he's a legitimate threat to take passes in this offense. So I think that Aaron Jones is just one of those guys that you want to draft and you're running in your fantasy league this year. Like, I know that I recently just moved him up above Austin Eckler because you look at the upside of Aaron Jones versus Eckler, and it's like Aaron Jones has the goal line work. He has the pass catching. He plays on a good offense. Like, he checks off all the boxes except for the fact he doesn't play on 80% of snaps, but he makes up for it by being, one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL since entering the NFL, basically. 3rd in PFF rushing grade, 4th in yards per carry since 2017, Aaron Jones. So for me, again, I think that whatever you can do to get Aaron Jones on your fantasy team, you should do it.
Jones, your RB7?
Yes. Yep. And I feel like it's too low. And I'm so torn like with Derrick Henry too, because I know Derrick Henry's not going to be as good as he was last year. I'm just like, just move Aaron Jones ahead of him. Like, that's what I kind of want to do. But yes, he's RB7.
I got him there too, 1 spot ahead of Eckler. I think it's a very fair spot. We've been wanting them to give him this feature workload for years. That's why people have a negative opinion on Jamal Williams, not because of Jamal Williams, but because he prevented us from seeing Aaron just getting absolutely fed. And particularly the lack of usage as a receiver has been the part that's pissed me off the most. Since 2017, only Austin Eckler and Nyheim Hines have averaged more yards per route run when lined up in the slot or out wide. You said it. Jones is like making legit contested catches downfield. He is a stud, and we've seen them tap into that more when Devontae Adams has missed time over the years. Just not enough as someone of his talents would be. Like, give this dude 80, 90 targets, and we're talking about a legit top 3 fantasy running back. He has the skill set to do it. Will he get it or not remains the question. I think this takes us to our favorite fantasy value, another flex with benefits, Mr. A.J. Dillon, because Andrew, as we've been harping on all offseason, that one tweet, the Jordan Love practice day, like another one of those just crazy, May days that took fantasy football Twitter over. AJ Dillon was catching wheel routes, and more. We see more training camp tweets about him being used in the passing game. Obviously didn't do much at Boston College, but wasn't asked to do much, and we've talked about the difference between those things. So with Williams leaving 150 touches on the table, Dillon seemingly is set up for those, and maybe the pass game work. If not, if Aaron Jones can just take that leftover pass down work, that's how he's going to get to the top 3. If not, Dillon, I think where he's going in that RB3 range is a great value because, again, we get the flex, and the benefits are an 80, 90% roll if Jones happens to miss time. Are you with me here, or are you looking elsewhere in the wide receiver core perhaps?
Yeah, I had A.J. Dillon as my wild card as a player that, if Aaron Jones gets hurt, he could potentially take over the backfield. Like, he has, again, flex with benefits. Like, and these are the running backs you want to make sure you target, and you don't need to go out of your way to get these guys. Like, they're all available at a good price in the double-digit rounds. It's really like rounds 9 through 11 is kind of like that sweet spot where you find a lot of these types of running backs like an A.J. Dillon. So I love the call there. My fantasy value pick was Randall Cobb, because I think that he should be viewed as the clear wide receiver to own outside of Devontae Adams in this offense. And it sounds kind of weird because Lazard is there, MBS is there. They drafted Amari Rodgers. So why would you go back to Randall Cobb? It's because Aaron Rodgers trusts this guy. He literally lives at his house. It's the Antonio Brown, Tom Brady thing all over again. And we saw how that happened with Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown was seeing as many targets as freaking Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And Antonio Brown was barely even drafted last year. So look, Randall Cobb is probably going to still be a guy that's like not going to rise in most like home league ADPs because of the fact that he was just kind of added to the player pool. Like, so, I mean, he wasn't even in my rankings like at all. I'm like, I'm not ranking Randall Cobb on the Houston Texans. Like, I'm not doing that. But the minute that he lands in Green Bay, it's like, oh man, like, what could this potentially be? And you look at how he did last year. I mean, I figure, at age 30 that Randall Cobb, as he washed up, so I kind of looked at his numbers and he actually, from the slot, he has the third highest passer rating generated in the last 2 seasons. So that's without Rodgers. And if you look at Rodgers the past 2 seasons, he has the PFF's third highest passing grade targeting the slot. So with Cobb locked and loaded in the inside, I think that he's going to see a lot of efficient targets. I think that's going to make him the player that you want in this offense behind Davante Adams.
It's going to be him or MVS, and we kind of flip-flopped fantasy values and wildcard scenarios here because my wildcard scenario is MVS actually becoming a thing here. Potential fourth-year breakout? Maybe, just maybe. We saw the booms, and I know there were some busts. I've seen the drop compilations. The one against the Eagles was my favorite. Rodgers throws this absurd 60-yard bomb to MVS, hits him in the chest, goes to the ground. And 10 seconds later, I counted it, 10 seconds later, they just show Rodgers hasn't moved, just staring at the same spot MVS dropped the ball. It's concerning to me that we haven't, when Rodgers basically says, I'm not playing for Green Bay again unless Randall Cobb comes back. And then he says, oh, and also like you guys cutting Jake Kummerow, who's the second best wide receiver in training camp, like back-to-back like shots at MVS without specifically saying his name. It's problematic. We have been getting some good training camp reports though. And this is from Matt Schneidman from The Athletic, who said Valdes-Scantling's hands have been noticeably better so far in camp. If he keeps this up, he's the clear-cut number 2 wideout behind Davante Adams. MVS isn't just a deep ball threat anymore. One of those, we'll believe it when we see it type situations. But man, even towards the beginning of the offseason, I've been happy to put MVS on some best ball rosters, rounds 14, 15 and on. He's the perfect player we look for. He's either going to give you a touchdown, 50 plus yards, maybe even flirt with 100 plus as he did on 2 separate occasions, or nothing, and he's not starting in your lineup anyway. So you could do worse, particularly, if you have Aaron Rodgers already, I don't see why you wouldn't be spamming some of these wide receivers with your late round picks. Andrew, our over-under set at 10, minus 140 juice on the over. How are you feeling about the 2021 Green Bay Packers?
I'm still going to go over here because I do think that having Aaron Rodgers there, even if his numbers decrease, I don't think the overall offensive output is necessarily going to decrease that substantially because he showed last year that he can still operate this offense at a high level. So I think that the offense is still going to be good. It's going to be above average. So I'm going to roll with the over here.
Yeah, Matt LaFleur, someone that we've given a lot of shit over time, but back-to-back years, first year as the head coach, 13 wins in each year. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is mostly responsible for that, but we did see that perfect marriage between him letting Rodgers make the absurd throws that only Aaron Rodgers can make a lot of times. Okay, I know Mahomes can do it too. Chill out, Chiefs fans. But perfect marriage between that and also setting himself up for some easy success. And that's why our own Eric Eager actually ranked Matt LaFleur as the best play caller in the NFL after the 2020 season. So I will also take the over. I'm just surprised it's not, closer to 11 and a half. I feel like they could still get pretty even action on both sides with that number set down at 10. I am happy to take the over there. Before we get into the next segment, people, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax is free fantasy football league managers, the most customizable, easy to use, and feature-rich platform in the entire industry. PFF is gearing up to play our leagues on Fantrax this season. My favorite part about it, you can customize your leagues however you want. So get the kickers the hell out of here where they belong. If you're coming from another site, that's no problem. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues completely free. Sign up and play now at fantrax.com/PFF and get a chance to win a trip to any regular season game this year for you and your entire league. Make your league on Fantrax and then head out to a free Las Vegas Raiders games with your buddies. That's fantrax.com/PFF, the home of fantasy sports. And also, people, college football season is just around the corner. Quinn Ewers and your Ohio State Buckeyes looking like the team to beat, maybe. I don't know. I'm just an ignorant Buckeye fan. Don't mind me. But anyway, to celebrate, DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is putting new players in the center of the action with $200 in free bets instantly if you bet $1 or more on any college football game. DraftKings Sportsbook is safe, secure, and reliable, located right here in the United States, so it's easy to deposit and withdraw your money at your convenience. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF to receive $200 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any college football game. That's promo code PFF to get your free $200 in free bets instantly. Limited time only. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Andrew, we've reached the final team in the NFC North. Your Minnesota Vikings. What's your defining question?
My defining question is, can Dalvin Cook be the RB1 overall and not Christian McCaffrey? And I kind of looked at the situation. And I mean, what Cook did last year, third in fantasy points overall, second expected fantasy points per game, first in touches per game. Everything is there for him to potentially be the guy that you want. And again, people were getting disappointed that, oh, I don't have the 101. Like I don't get Christian McCaffrey. But I think that like Dalvin Cook is like basically right on par with what CMC could potentially produce in his offense. And I kind of looked at the offense as a whole. And look, Carolina, we've talked about Sam Darnold, how we're not like super thrilled about like his potential outlook. But with this Minnesota Vikings offense, I mean, Dalvin Cook probably has a path to more touchdown upside than McCaffrey does in a Sam Darnold-led offense. You look at Kirk Cousins last year, his 35 passing touchdowns were a career high. So again, it's kind of going back to, okay, so if his touchdowns come down based on just natural regression, his red zone touchdown rate was the highest of all players last season. You know, Adam Thielen, is Adam Thielen going to catch 14 touchdowns again? Probably not.
No.
So if those come down, where are the touchdowns going to go? I think it could go to Dalvin Cook, who could potentially be the RB1 in this offense. So again, there's not a lot of question marks about this offense overall, just because it is so concentrated on the running back, the top two receivers. So that's kind of the question I took about Dalvin Cook. And I think that if you have the number 2 overall pick, I think you should still be absolutely thrilled that you're not, you didn't get CMC, but you're literally getting the second best thing.
Yeah, look, I've talked about this kind of fantasy opportunity score I put together where if you just ignore the names and if you just look at the projected volume for everyone, historically targets are worth 1.61 PPR points, rush attempts are worth 0.6. If you just only look at the projections and see, okay, where the running backs rank in pure expected opportunity, it's number 1, Christian McCaffrey, number 2, Dalvin Cook, and number 3, Alvin Kamara. And hey, they just so all happen to be awesome real life players as well. Those should be your top 3 backs in any half or full PPR setting. My defining question was more about the offensive line, because our own Seth Galina wrote an awesome article earlier this offseason calling Kirk Cousins a dark horse MVP candidate in large part because some of the improvements they made on the offensive line. This next excerpt is from Seth's article. Just creeping to average would be an improvement for this offensive line, and the front office has made the right moves to do that. That puts the ball in Kirk's court. The pieces are significantly better than they've ever been around him, subtracting the timeless skill of Stephon Diggs, but replacing it with Justin Jefferson, Ezra Cleveland, Christian Darrisaw, and Wyatt Davis is probably a net positive. And that's it, man. Like Kirk Cousins in the news for, all the annoying reasons recently, but just in terms of what he's doing on the football field, he's a lot better than people give him credit for. Since 2018, when he joined the Vikings, 7th among 50 quarterbacks in PFF passing grade, tied with Russell Wilson for 11th in yards per attempt, 4th in adjusted completion rate, 7th in QB rating, and he's been doing it downfield. And you can keep saying he hasn't won the big one because anyone that hasn't won a Super Bowl hasn't won the big one. Like, he has a fantastic game in the Superdome, outduels Drew Brees, makes countless so clutch throws to Adam Thielen, puts the ball in a perfect spot to Kyle Rudolph to win the game, and he loses the next week, and everyone just says, oh, typical Kirk Cousins, can't win, when the bright lights are on. So Kirk Cousins, someone that, I'm not saying you need to treat this guy as a top 5 quarterback, but hey, if Matt Ryan had it all go together one year and won an MVP, I think Cousins is good enough to maybe pull that out. Again, if everything goes right, which as Seth points out, maybe just maybe with some of the offensive line upgrades they've made, things could go right in a big way in 2021. Andrew, who's your most underutilized player on the Minnesota Vikings?
Irv Smith Jr., because it looked like he was going to break out all over the place. Kyle Rudolph was gone. Exactly what we wanted. We're like, okay, sick. This is perfect. It's lining up. The stars are aligning for Irv Smith, because last year without Rudolph, we saw Smith rank 8th in fantasy points per game, and we saw his role as a receiver increase dramatically, ran 118 routes over that stretch. It was nearly 30 per game, which was 8th most at the position. It was actually a much higher than his 18 routes run per game, because that's the thing. We need our tight ends running routes. We don't want them blocking. We want them to be bad blockers. We want them to be good pass catchers and running routes. But unfortunately, Mike Zimmer comes out. He's like, yeah, we're not going to expand Irv Smith's role this year. We are going to just, use Tyler Conklin a little bit more. So that kind of dampened the potential breakout. I know the reports have been pretty good about Irv Smith, but you have to tread pretty lightly, or tread with caution with Irv Smith before you kind of go all in and be like, all right, he's my tight end to own. Like, I don't know if I feel comfortable having him as my tight end 1 going into the season because you don't know how these snaps are going to play out. During that stretch of games when Kyle Rudolph missed, yes, Irv Smith was producing, but it wasn't like the usage wasn't really in his favor versus Tyler Conklin. Conklin was basically doing almost exactly everything that Irv Smith was doing as well. So that's one of the concerns. Again, I'd love for Irv Smith to just kind of take over and take that next step because we know he's talented coming from Alabama. He's got athletic upside. This is some of the traits we look for in these breakout tight ends. But if it's a 2 tight end system, even if they don't have any other receivers to throw the ball to, there are some red flags.
Yeah, I love Irv Smith. You love Irv Smith. The Vikings, I guess they love Irv Smith, but they don't care about his fantasy value. Yeah, they're lukewarm on the situation. You mentioned the 4-game split to end last year with Kyle Rudolph sideline. The first game of that, Irv was coming back from injury, so he only played 28 total snaps. After that, though, he was playing 79% plus in 3 games. So in those 4 games, which, again, one slightly reduced, but otherwise pretty good split, Irv played 203 snaps, Conklin 202. Smith had 20 targets, Conklin had 23. They both had 15 catches. Like, Tyler Conklin is just going to be this like Jamal Williams type player in terms of being annoying for fantasy. He's not really going to be a fantasy asset in his own right. He's just going to hold back Irv Smith. So I've seen some people really getting behind Irv, and he is a great player. One of the prime examples, though, of why we're chasing fantasy production, not guys that are necessarily great in real life. So I have Irv Smith as my tight end 17. He's right there with Mike Gesicki, Cole Kmet, Evan Ingram, guys that I'm just quite a bit lower on than others because we're chasing opportunity, not looking like Irv's going to have a ton of it in 2021. Andrew, who's your favorite fantasy value on the Minnesota Vikings?
At the top, I said that this offense is so concentrated that pretty defined like where these players are going in terms of ADP. I don't really think there's any like streaming values, but the only guy that I kind of noticed I thought was kind of down, lower than I would expect, is Justin Jefferson. So he is my wide receiver 6 overall, and his ADP is wide receiver 8. I don't know if the shoulder injury has impacted his ADP at all, but I felt pretty firm with wide receiver 6. I have him like basically right outside the top tier of the top 5 guys, which are Jefferson or Hopkins, Ridley, Hopkins, Ridley. Who are the other top guys?
Oh, you know them. Come on, Andrew.
Adams, Hill, Diggs, Ridley,
there you
Hopkins.
go.
Those are my top 5. It's been a long day of ranking players. So Justin Jefferson comes in at number 6 for me, and I don't know what else. Like, I don't get how you can rank other guys higher than him. I mean, what? 22-year-old rookie, compiled 1,400 receiving yards, 3rd among all receivers, 90.5 PFF receiving grade, 2nd, 2.6 yards per route run, 2nd, set the record for most rookie receiving yards in the Super Bowl era, and earned the highest PFF receiving grade versus man coverage since 2014. As a rookie, in a truncated offseason, averaged 18.4 fantasy points per game, which was top 5 last year. So if he just does what he did last year, he's top 5. So how is he already being ranked outside the top 5 is something that I don't really understand. So for me, I mean, this guy could take another step forward. I mean, everything out of camp before his injury was, this guy looks more explosive than last year. I'm just like, oh my God, like I want this guy on my team. And the fact that I'm a little bit higher on him than the market would imply, I'm thrilled about.
Dynasty overall wide receiver 1.
Yeah. I think, no, still AJ Brown. Still, because Julio's not, I don't know how long Julio's going to be. I think Justin Jefferson's number 2, but AJ Brown, yes, he's still number 1, but Justin Jefferson is number 2.
Jefferson, AJB, and is CD 3? Is that our big 3?
I mean, probably is now.
Yeah.
It has to be now.
After that latest training camp touchdown, how could it not be, right? But yeah, no, it's a fair point on Jefferson. I have him as the wide receiver 8, just behind Metcalf and Allen. That's full PPR. So I don't disagree with you, though. He could be up there as high as 6 for sure. Because Cousins, just like really Russell Wilson, even though they operate more in run-first offenses, both quarterbacks do a great job of just really centralizing their entire target share around their top 2 guys. Last year, only DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett boasted the higher combined target share. Then Jefferson, Dillon, only DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson beat them in terms of air yard share. So yeah, man, Jefferson, I think has certainly a great chance to be a top 5 receiver. Are you fading Dillon again? Because I saw someone bring up a good point where I was talking about how I want Cooper over CD, and they were like, well, by that, by chasing the veteran logic that's been there before, you take Dillon over Jefferson. And, not exactly the same comparison. I think the issue was, like you said, is he going to catch 14 touchdowns again when his targets just really fell off a cliff, man. In 2017, Thielen averaged 8.9 targets per game. In 2018, he averaged 9.6, dropped all the way down to 7.2 last year. And I remember I was like higher on Thielen than almost anyone. I don't know, as my wide receiver 6, I think, going into last season. He finished wide receiver 10. I got freaking lucky, people, because Jefferson was the number 1 receiver on this team by the end of the year. You know, I was picking I was picking Thielen as the wide receiver 6 because I thought 150 targets were in his potential range of outcomes. Now, no, that's in Jefferson's range of outcomes, not so much Thielen, unfortunately. So still solid. If he falls, into the wide receiver 3 territory where I have him, absolutely sign me up. Just not someone that you should be using anything resembling a top 20 pick on at this point in time. I would say my favorite fantasy value, or at least my favorite, the guy I have the most exposure to has been Alexander Mattison. And I was kind of surprised when I looked at the underdog exposure, but when he's going as an RB47 right now, I'm fine on that. I think that Falcons game, when we all had him ranked inside the top 10, just scared everyone off. He only got 11 touches. He busted in a big way. But they were down 20-0 with like 10 minutes left in the third quarter. So yeah, Amir Abdullah came in. He took the pass down work. And that is a problem. We're not exactly looking at Tony Pollard or Latavius Murray, guys that will get 80-90% snap rates if the RB1 leaves. But still, people, we had 3 games with Cook either sidelined or limited to fewer than half of the snaps last year. Madison had the 11 touches, but then 23 and 24 in those other games. If Cook is out, Madison is going to be the absolute workhorse bell cow. And Andrew, we talked about already. We want the flexes with benefits above people like Madison. But at a certain price, Madison offers you a hell of a lot of value, particularly behind a running back that has gotten hurt every single season of his career.
Yeah, you can't ignore the facts that Dalvin Cook played 14 games last year. He never played 16 games in a full season. That doesn't mean he's a liability at the number 2 pick. It's just the fact of that's what the running back position is. Like, guys miss games, and the Vikings realize that they'd rather just sit Dalvin Cook instead of play him at 75% when they could just play Alexander Mattison for a game. Like, that's going to be part. So there's going to be weeks where hopefully Alexander Mattison just benefits from better game script that you're going to be able to play him. And it's funny that Tony Pollard is the number 1 ranked guy for the handcuff potential because of the upside that if Zeke goes down. But Zeke has literally missed 1 game his entire career because of injury. So I just think it's funny how we kind of operate that way, but they're chasing the upside of, if Zeke goes down, it's like, yeah, well, he's like the least likely of the top running backs to go down because he's just been so durable throughout his career. So I think the same thing can be said about like Rashad Penny as well. Like Chris Carson always misses games. So Rashad Penny's actually finally fully healthy. So kind of throw him as another guy. Seattle could run the ball a lot. So potentially a sneaky flex with benefits is Rashad Penny. Got to give him a shout.
Yeah, now that we actually got some good news on Penny's health, I mean, I was all over that, around draft time, when the NFL draft was going on. But then afterwards, we got some May reports saying he wasn't 100%. Now he is, apparently. So just another saga with offseason training camp news. Gotta live with it. Wild card scenario, I had that Cousins just rocks out and both Jefferson and Thielen repeat as wide receiver 1s. This would have to be like more of an offensive shift, I think, to more of a pass-first attack. The defense would have to stay bad because, again, I'm just not so sure there's going to be overall enough targets for both these guys, even with Kirk condensing it as much as he can. But with that said, man, we know how good Jefferson is. And Thielen, even though the touchdowns are going to fall off, I mean, nothing about his play last year looked like a guy that's just poised to fall off a cliff or anything. So even though, I mean, as an industry, we're pretty low on Thielen. He's like wide receiver 27, 28, I think, mostly ADP-wise. But he could keep balling out. It's not like Dillon just consistently won, on overwhelming athleticism throughout his entire career. I'm not trying to say that he's not an athlete. I understand you can be white and also a highly athletic receiver in the year 2021. I'm just saying, even though the age is getting up there and stuff, still someone that really for the last year and a half, we've still seen operating as a high-end talent. Just an opportunity where maybe we're wrong. We'll see what it looks like when week 1 comes along. What are you thinking as a wild card, Andrew?
Yeah, just so I can get my take on Thielen, I agree with you that I'm definitely lower on him than other players. I just think there's a lot of other receivers in that range that I kind of want to chase someone that's ascending versus a player that really looks more or less like they're descending based on the fact that now he's going to kind of step back and be the number 2 in the offense when he's been the number 1 last year, at least for the beginning of the season. So I definitely agree with you there. For me, it's okay. So what happens if one of these receivers goes down? Like, who's playing wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings? Because you have So this is their starters at Saturday's practice because Justin Jefferson obviously got his shoulder banged up, so he's not practicing. Adam Thielen wasn't there. They're starting 4 receivers. KJ Osborne was a draft 5th rounder last year, didn't play a single snap on offense. Amir Smith-Marset, their 2021 5th rounder. Dan Chisna, no idea who that is. And Chad Beebe, who's kind of been on the depth chart for a couple seasons now. Because Olabisi Johnson tore his ACL, so he's already gone. Like, he's out of the conversation already. So this team could be in trouble if one of their top 2 guys ends up getting hurt at some point. And I think that would actually might be the path for Irv Smith Jr. to actually see an expanded role, because I think that they would have to be forced to play him in a pseudo like wide receiver role in the slot. So I think that that's something to pay attention to, that yes, we're concerned about the Tyler Conklin thing, but if one of these receivers goes down, I can't imagine one of these guys is going to step up and have a huge role. D.D. Westbrook they signed. He's coming back from a torn ACL, so he hasn't even really practiced in full yet. So there's a lot of question marks about the receiver thing. And that's something that could really hurt Cousins as well, I think, is if one of their top 2 guys goes down. Like, they have no depth behind them, whereas you have like the Buccaneers who have like 12,000 wide receivers they could turn to if, one of their starters goes down.
Irv last year, 28% snaps came in the slot or out wide. Certainly something he's capable of. Good notes on all these banged up receivers. I just hope someone overtakes Chad Beebe, not because I have anything against him. I'm just so tired of every game he gets 1 or 2 catches and the announcer just has to remind us that, oh, his dad is actually Don Beebe, just like Chris Hogan played lacrosse, just like, Matthew Stafford and Clayton Kershaw used to play in the same little league team. We get it. Tell us once or twice and move the hell on. Chad Beebe, Don Beebe's son. End of story. Last time
I like D.D. Westbrook. I mean, if he can be healthy, he has 2 seasons on his resume, 2018, 2019, 66 catches, over 650 receiving yards, and he's been primarily the slot receiver for the Jags. So theoretically, he would be the guy that they play in 11 personnel when they have Thielen and Jefferson on the outside, because those guys didn't have like 50% plus slot snap shares last season. So, but it depends on his health, and most of the time they're going to not even run 11 personnel. They're going to just try to focus on using 12.
Former Blitnikoff winner, but I agree. I think Dede has the most upside out of any of those guys, but none of these number 3 receivers are going to be fantasy relevant because Dillon and Jefferson have such a stranglehold on the target share. Andrew, the over-under for the Vikings set at 9. We got minus 115 going both ways. What are you feeling?
I'm going to go with the over here. It really has nothing to do with the offense, because I think the offense will kind of be status quo of what they've been, run-centric, but with efficient passing game led by Kirk Cousins. It's really about the defense, because last year was uncharacteristically Mike Zimmer's worst defense of his coaching career. It was just so bad, and it's because they had so much overturn from the year prior, and they had guys opting out. And this is a list of all the players that they're getting back this year or have added to their defense. So Daniel Hunter, 2nd in the NFL in pressures and 5th in sacks in 2019, missed the entire season in 2020. Linebackers Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, they missed 19 games combined last year. Michael Pierce was their big defensive tackle signing that they were going to use to plug up the middle after losing a guy in free agency. He opted out last year because of COVID. So they didn't even have that player, that big defensive tackle, to help stop the run, which is why they were so bad against the run last year. Cameron Dantzler was a rookie that they drafted last season. He started out the season very poorly, but finished as one of PFF's highest graded cornerbacks down the stretch. They obviously also added Patrick Peterson and Rashad Breeland. I don't think either of those guys are elite players, but they needed depth at the cornerback position because they were basically starting all rookies last season. So they got some veteran presence there as well. So I think that the defense is going to be significantly improved. I think that's something to also consider when we talk about this Vikings offense. I don't know if we're going to see this team be an offense or a team that we target for DFS shootouts and things like that, because I think they're going to run the ball, and I think their defense is going to be a lot better. So when you cite, the Vikings sucked against, X position last year, I think you might want to take a step back, because I think this defense is going to look way different than it did last year.
Also added Patrick Peterson and Rashad Breeland to start at cornerback. I think Peterson is, a shell of his former self, still an upgrade over the guys they were trotting out there in 2020. And yeah, I'm with you. I trust the Vikings should turn around better than the Titans or the Raiders, some of these other teams that had, pretty huge splits between their offensive and defensive points per game rank, because last year was literally the first time since Zimmer got to Minnesota they didn't have a great defense. He got there in 2014. Their defensive ranks and points per game allowed 11th, 5th, 6th, 1st, 9th, 5th, 29th. So Maybe Zimmer, maybe he's just lost his fastball. But I think, again, like you said, Daniil Hunter, Michael Pierce, when we have a smart coach getting a lot of great players back, and then, just getting maybe Peterson can have like a Xavier Rhodes like impact in the system, better suited to his talents. Just, again, I don't think he's fully done. Are his days of just locking up the opponent's number one receiver week after week over? Yeah, but I'm sure that Zimmer can, play around what he can still do. I am also taking the over on the 2021 Vikings. 9 just feels low, man. And I feel like, it's just always comes back to people underestimating Kirk a little bit. And I must admit, I am a little nervous myself putting so much stock in Kirk Cousins in at least these first 7 weeks of the season. Again, we didn't even mention that with this, but yeah, people, Kirk Cousins, first 7 games. Don't forget it when you draft Trey Lance and Justin Fields. Takes us right to the division pick. Packers the favorite at -160, Vikings at +250, Bears +550, and the Detroit Lions +2,800 for those of you feeling frisky out there. Who do you like, Andrew?
Well, I don't want to burn my money, so I'm not going to take the Lions in this scenario. So I'm going to go with the Vikings. I like the Kirk Cousins narrative that he just needs one kind of outlier season for him to kind of put himself in, if Matt Ryan could do it. I think that was a really good comparison. If Matt Ryan could do it for 1 year and lead his team, to a Super Bowl or a division championship, I think that Kirk Cousins could probably do it as well. So he's got the weapons, he's got the defense to back him, got the running back. So yeah, I'll take the Vikings at +250.
Yeah, I'm taking the Vikings as well. Like, call me crazy. I kind of think maybe everything going on in Green Bay this entire offseason, not really a positive for everyone there. Like, it's like Aaron came back. Great. Did anyone even expect him to come back before that? I don't know. And how do they feel about him, probably leaving next year? I don't know. And again, at +250 for a very good team. I think those are odds that I am down to clown with. Andrew, we only have one more team preview coming up. It will be the AFC North. We should have that published this Thursday or Friday. You yourself are finishing up your fantastic team preview series on PFF.com. How many more you got over there?
I just have the AFC North to kind of just wrap up. I got some notes on most of the teams already done, but just publishing it up and then also going back and refreshing some of them. So again, this way you don't search for the Rams and be like, Andrew, like, Cam Akers is not a breakout anymore. Like, what are you doing, man? It's like, no, like, it's been updated. Like, Darrell Henderson has now slid into the breakout section. Cam Akers, I'm sorry, I had to take you out. So going back and updating some of them with some news because they've been out for a while. Want to make sure everybody has the most up-to-date information. Again, news is happening all the time in the NFL, but try to keep things up to date as possible.
Great stuff. And as always, people, you can find Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _. I too am kind of tackling that endeavor with my recent writing. I have an article coming out on Wednesday when you should be hearing this. I went through every single NFL team and just listed the offseason moves. Who did they sign? Who did they trade for? Who did they draft? I just focused on the actionable players at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Did a short little blurb. You can run through it and just catch up because, sometimes you just don't remember. Joe Flacco is now a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. And if you just haven't been paying attention to the entire offseason, nice little refresher for you to go in, get caught up ahead of August, ahead of your fantasy drafts, and ahead of real football on its way soon. So thank you as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. New episodes out every single day throughout the offseason, and we will be back with more shortly. He's Andrew. I'm Ian. Until next time, take care, everybody.